Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 7th of March 2016, the podcast that can hear you, just barely hear you. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again is Travis Retriever. Travis, welcome back to the show.
Bark. Also, glad to be back.
So, it's been a few weeks while I've been recovering, including 2 rounds of antibiotics, but I think I'm finally on the mend, and thanks again to Dave, Jacob, and Charles for pitching in while I was down. Now, my hearing isn't completely back to normal yet, so apologies if the audio quality isn't up to snuff. I'm not going to try to do any EQ or anything until I can hear properly again. So, Travis, I'll just copy over your settings from last time, and hopefully nothing's changed then, and hopefully it'll sound good for everyone.
It should be, yeah.
But I did want to make sure to get the podcast out this week because I didn't want to wait any longer to cover this issue of the FBI wanting Apple to break the security on iPhones. So I figured we'd just focus our entire News of the Bogus section on that.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's been a long time coming. Like, reminds me of the Boston Marathon bomber folks who, yeah, they had that stuff over unencrypted channels. Like, if I recall correctly, they were posting about this stuff like on their Facebook and Twitter, yet lo and behold, the NSA either was incompetent or completely complicit and didn't stop them.
Yeah, and the same is true of this San Bernardino attack. These 2 terrorists, Rizwan Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, and since they're terrorist scum and dead anyway, I'm not at all worried about whether I pronounce their names properly.
Same.
But yeah, they left their footprints all over social media, so now they're trying to pretend like, oh, we need to break encryption to find all this stuff out. And
oh god, this one quote of this guy saying like, oh well, encryption is a long-term threat to law enforcement. And I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
This guy watches way too much CSI.
Well, before we go any further, for those of you who have been living under a rock, these guys killed 14 people and injured 22 others in a mass shooting in San Bernardino. Now, as part of their preparations for the attack, they destroyed their cell phones to keep law enforcement from getting the information on them. But Farouk was a food inspector for the San Bernardino County Department of Public Health, and they have his work iPhone that he was issued from the department. Now, this iPhone is locked with a 6-digit code, and there are protections preventing someone from brute forcing the code, and that's where you sit down and you type 0000001, 0000002, 0000003 until you get the right one.
Yeah, basically you just try every single possible solution. Mathematicians have a very odd idea of force.
Yeah, and they have these protections in place where each time you mistype it, you have to wait longer to type in the next one. And then I think if you mistype 10 in a row, it just completely locks down the iPhone. And so what the FBI wants Apple to do is write a special version of iOS that's basically a hack tool. They would push it down to the phone using automatic updates, and it would remove those increased delays. It would remove the 10 try limit, and it would also allow the FBI to make all of these tries electronically instead of having to sit there and type it in. So in that case, they'd be able to brute force it in a matter of days instead of years.
Oh, geez. And this also brings me up to the other thing that we've had to point out about 100 some odd times now. Last I checked, math is still math, and it works the same for the good and bad guys. If the FBI is able to bypass the security and the like, then so could hackers onto your phone. And some might say, oh, but it's just for this one phone. Yeah, show me a GovCo program that's, temporary and not permanent.
Yeah, and that's actually this first story. This isn't being widely reported, but the FBI wants to do this with no less than 12 iPhones.
Yeah.
And these other cases don't even involve terror charges, but they're still saying they need to bypass it, and they're still citing this All Writs Act of 1789, which was actually made before the Bill of Rights passed, so it's interesting they don't care about the Bill of Rights because, oh, that's old and that was then, and then they're depending on this 1789 law,
Yeah, because, oh, well, this law is important and stuff. Oh, what, the Bill of Rights, that's the highest law of the land and stuff? Oh, but, that's just a piece of paper.
And the thing is, Apple isn't just saying, no, we hate the government, we're not going to help you. As we'll see in these stories, they've tried all sorts of ways to help them do it, but the FBI really, really, really wants them to write this hacking tool. And Apple doesn't want to do that because they want consumers to be confident in their product.
As much flack as I give Apple, one thing that they do legitimately do right would be security. If I were to ever switch over to Apple products, how secure they are would be a reason why.
Yeah, that's something they've really gotten better on in recent years, and Microsoft has too, so...
Yeah. Well, you know, when you're at the bottom, the only place you can go is up, as they say.
That's true. But that's the thing. Ordinarily, getting this information wouldn't be an issue. Apple, in the past, has given law enforcement the iCloud backups. And that's what they did here. The problem is, the last backup was done in September. Well, no problem. All they have to do is take the phone to a known Wi-Fi network and let it sync with iCloud. Problem: the blundering, hand-fisted FBI told San Bernardino law enforcement to reset the code, and how they thought that would help them, I have no idea. But that resets the Apple ID, and now it can't do iCloud backups unless you unlock the phone first.
Wow. But, you know, these are our technological superiors who invented the internet, and without which we wouldn't have computers and roads and stuff. Yeah, whatever you say.
And there was another way they could have done it because, like I said, this was the phone for the San Bernardino County. It wasn't his personal iPhone, it was his work iPhone. And they had gotten this service with Apple where they could get all of the information from their employees' phones if they needed to. The problem was they hadn't installed it.
Jesus.
So, I mean, everyone's just dropping the ball right and left here.
Dropping it like it's a hot potato, I tells ya.
And they want us to trust them with hacker tools, basically.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
And the FBI even asked the NSA to unlock the phone, and they're like, we can't do it. There's too much security here.
Tweedledee, Tweedledum, trying to get help from the experts who, thankfully, actually believe in freedom.
That's the thing. If you do this stuff right, then not even a major government can get into it.
Good.
But then you have things like this. You know, they go, you got to write a special version that'll let us in. So
yeah, basically government using its tried and true method of good old-fashioned duress. Do it or we'll shut you down or kill you. Ad baculum, ad baculum, ad baculum. Yeah, and it's also a reason why I lost a lot of respect for Bill Gates in recent weeks when I saw him trying to side with the FBI on this. And I'm like,
yeah,
well, he lost a lot of brownie points for me. Just seriously, dude?
Yeah. Now, there is one piece of good news. A different judge in a different case actually rejected the government's interpretation of the All Writs Act to say, no, you can't do that. That's a violation of separation of powers. So now we've got this separate court case, nothing to do with the San Bernardino case, but a different judge dismissing the same argument. Well, Comey, of course, we talked about this guy before, FBI Director James Comey, and there was a hearing with him with the House Judiciary Committee, and he actually said some pretty scary things. One thing he said was, quote, slippery slope arguments are always attractive, but I suppose you could say, well, Apple's engineers have this in their head. What if they're kidnapped and forced to write software? That's where the judge has to sort this out between good lawyers on both sides making all reasonable arguments. You know, I thought slavery was abolished in 1865.
Oh, come on, Shane. Didn't you hear? The 13th Amendment is just words on paper.
Yeah, I mean, they want Apple to write this special hacking tool and put it in a special version of iOS. That means forcing their programmers to do work.
Yeah.
And Apple pointed out, and this is from Apple General Counsel Bruce Sewell, quote, building that software tool would not just affect one iPhone, it would weaken the security for all of them.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
And now Apple says they're working on a completely unbreakable iPhone that even Apple wouldn't be able to hack.
Good.
Which is what they should have been doing from the beginning, but...
well.
But it is cool. They hired Frederick Jacobs, and he's one of the developers of the app Signal. It used to be called TextSecure, and this is a great app. I use this with texting certain people. And the way it works is it's a replacement for your SMS app that's built into your phone. So you can do normal SMS app, but if both of you have Signal, then you make a completely secure end-to-end texting with each other. And it doesn't even go over the normal SMS. It goes over your data line. So it just like happens immediately, and it's fast and it's secure and it's beautiful. So they've hired one of these Signal developers to really help them with that, so that's good.
Yep, it's an app that I have too. I need to get around to using it. I think I'll like it better than Telegram, just because I don't like how Telegram isn't very anonymous. Like, it automatically adds all of my contacts on my phone, many of whom aren't furry, or the libertarians on this podcast, to that list, which kind of spooked me out and got me to go away from it.
Yeah, Signal is much better. And Signal, you can even make encrypted phone calls, too.
Cool.
All going over your data line, not your normal thing. So if you're limited on data, you might want to keep an eye on it, but if you're limited on the number of texts or whatever, then it can be good. And if you're on Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter, so.
Sweet.
Now, like I said before, they've been cooperating with authorities to turn over iCloud backups, but they're also working on a way of encrypting iCloud backups that only the account owner would have access, and Apple couldn't get you into it, and neither could the FBI or hackers or whatever. Because if there's a way for Apple to get into it, there's a way for hackers to get into it.
It sounds like they're going to try and move over to something, maybe not exactly, but more towards the TNU, trust no one encryption philosophy. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, the TNO.
Yeah, TNO. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah, Signal is TNO. Well, I guess it's technically not TNO. It's end-to-end. That's where you're doing from one person to another, so you have to trust that other person not to release it. But TNO applies to things like backups and whatever, where you are the only human being in the world that can get into it. But if you remember a few months ago, and this is kind of the disturbing part, officials were basically saying how great it would be if we had another terrorist attack on U.S. soil, so they could use that as an excuse to mandate encryption backdoors.
Well, glad to know they admit to being a bunch of fear-mongering assholes who don't give two shits about the actual people that are being killed in these.
But that's what's being said here in this Ars Technica story, that, like I said, this wasn't his personal iPhone, which he destroyed. It was his work iPhone, which probably doesn't have anything on it.
I mean, wouldn't surprise me if it did, honestly. Reminds me of this one post on Facebook of yours you posted where if you're ever, forced to give people, this encryption or password or whatever it was or something, how it would basically just be a bunch of stuff asking, between you or yourself, asking if the stuff worked.
That's it. When you have geeks like us who are like, oh, I'm going to encrypt everything, we don't really have anything we need to encrypt. So it's just all BS stuff. But that's fine. Encrypt all the things. I want to see this. I want this to be like some big kind of court case, and we're going to force this guy to decrypt his email or whatever it is. It's so strong we can't get into it, and the guy fights it in the courts, and he ends up losing, and he finally relents and says, okay, here's the key to decrypt the email, and it's like a recipe for mint chutney or something.
Ooh, well, I love recipes.
You go through all that, and it's just nothing. So that may be what this is, according to San Bernardino Police Chief Jared Bergwin.
Well, nice to hear at least someone with at least a semblance of sense on there.
Yeah. And he told NPR there's a, quote, reasonably good chance that there's nothing of any value on the iPhone. Maybe there was some information that would lead to a larger plot and a larger network, and therefore there are other people out there that are still a danger. I think the probability is low, but that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense that he would have put any of that on this iPhone. Or if he did, that he wouldn't have destroyed it when he destroyed his personal iPhone. But I think it's always disgusting when the government uses dead Americans as an excuse to push policies that will not make us safer, because this won't. If anything, it'll put us in a greater threat, because really the only people who deliberately take steps to securely encrypt our communications are nerds like me who, like I said, don't really have anything to say, and these organized terrorist groups and organized hacker groups that are out to either kill you or steal your identity or whatever.
Hey, you're the reason I found and still use LastPass.
Cool. But, all this stuff is already out of the bag. The math is out in the wild, and there's no stopping it. All this stuff would only make it so that ordinary people who just use the default settings won't be protected. So Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all these hacking groups, they're going to be protected, and ordinary American citizens would be vulnerable.
Wait, so you're telling me government action, as always, is just going to affect the worst and most vulnerable people while doing nothing, if not even enriching the people who already have it best to begin with? Say it ain't so.
Well, how many times have we seen that? Like with those small business people who just make their daily deposits and its amounts just under 10,000, and then all of a sudden the IRS is jumping all over them.
Whereas, as we all know, if it were a big corporation pulling stuff like that, they wouldn't bat an eye, and we all know it.
Well, and it was actually supposed to be for drug dealers.
Yeah,
but
I know.
These aren't drug dealers, these are small business people.
No kidding.
But I'll tell you one thing. It's always heartening to see the loved one of a victim keep their heads about them and come out against the government. Case in point, Carol Adams, who lost her son in the San Bernardino attacks. She's siding with Apple and consumer privacy and saying that Apple should refuse the FBI's demands to create this software.
Good on ya.
So her son was Robert Adams, and he was a 40-year-old environmental health specialist, and she told the New York Post that the constitutional right to privacy, quote, is what makes America great to begin with. This is what separates us from communism, isn't it? The fact that we have the right to privacy. I think Apple is definitely within their rights to protect the privacy of all Americans. This is what makes America great to begin with, that we abide by a constitution that gives us the right of privacy, the right to bear arms, and the right to vote. Well, okay, technically I have to jump in and say the Constitution doesn't give us those rights. We have those rights because we're human beings. The Constitution just protects those rights. But other than that, awesome.
Yeah, definitely worlds apart from some of the other people. Like, I remember hearing Dave getting rightly pissed, nay, indignant at this one dude in this other shooting who, his son's body wasn't even cold yet, and this is like literally while he was being buried, right? And he's saying, and this is why we need more gun control. It's like, and Father of the Year award. Good lord, man.
And he was a politician who'd been pushing for gun control all along, so...
Of course. Yeah. And then you have the people with the Paris attacks, like the anti-refugee folks, and a lot of the conspiracy nut or false flag dipshits. And the worst part with that was, not only could they not wait till the bodies were even cold, they couldn't even wait until the attack was over until everyone who was going to die was dead. Congratulations to the conspiracy nutters and the anti-refugee folk in that case. You're officially worse than the anti-gun nuts.
Yep, bodies still hitting the floor and they're already doing all of that.
Jesus.
But I mean, she just knows what security experts have been saying all this time. You can't make something stronger by making it weaker. And what the FBI wants will make us all more vulnerable.
Well, to Apple, here's hoping you do go through with making that unbreakable iPhone, and here's hoping that other companies, cough Android and them cough, are able to follow suit.
Yeah, they've been really working to lock down Android, too. They've done a really good job with that in Marshmallow. But
yeah,
the big fear here is that it might be win-win for the FBI. If Apple caves, then of course FBI wins. If Apple stands their ground and doesn't do it, then that might give the FBI what they need to go to Congress and say, see, this is why we should mandate backdoors.
Oh, God.
Which is exactly what we don't want.
I hope security and encryption prevail in this. I mean, at least for right now, the internet is the closest thing to the last bastion of freedom that exists in this world. I mean, it's about as close to a free market as we have that currently exists. Here's hoping we can keep what little of it we have. It's bad enough with the insanity with the DMCA and the where's the fair use stuff going on. Despite the claims of others saying, oh, but if the companies follow it falsely, then that means they're guilty of perjury. Yeah, well, that doesn't seem to be affecting them so much, so either the law is useless to stop that, or it was part of its design. Either way, it's a law that's unfit to exist.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplex Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplexbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
And now let's Grangerize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. So we've been covering all the horrible things happening in Venezuela due to socialism and how the socialists were voted out in a landslide, but they're still refusing to give up the ghost, and they just keep making things worse. Currently, Venezuela has the world's highest inflation rate. Last year, it was 275%.
Ugh.
This year, it's expected to rise to 720%.
I'm surprised they haven't started forming angry mobs yet.
Oh, they have.
Oh, well, disregard then.
That was what they were covering last week, all the protests that the government started using violence against.
Lovely.
It also has one of the world's highest murder rates and the biggest shortages of consumer goods. Everything from car parts to toilet paper. They've got power outages. Factories and shops have to close or limit their hours. And according to The Economist, the poverty rate is 76%. That's up from 55% when Hugo Chavez first took power.
Oh my god. Burn victims, your socialist paradise. And before you say, but not democratic socialism, yeah, sorry, but Bernie has come in support of very undemocratic socialism as well, so no excuse making. But that doesn't count because it's not a rich first world nation, herder!
That and Venezuela is democratic socialism.
Okay.
And we've covered before how there's just no food. They stand in line for a long time to get into stores, and then when they get there, there's nothing on the shelves. And we talked about that one governor saying, well, we can eat fried rocks. Yeah, he uses the word we, but I don't think he'll be the one.
That's even worse than let them eat cake, as we said before.
Yeah. So, economist Ricardo Hausman in the Financial Times pointed out Venezuela will earn less than $18 billion from exports, while it still owes $10 billion in payments on the $120 billion in debt that it's racked up.
And apparently, it already owes China about $50 billion. Whew.
Yeah, and that only leaves $8 billion coming in for imports.
God.
And Venezuela now has to import most of its food, and it looks like a debt default is coming.
Oh, geez. Fun, fun, fun.
And Maduro and his ministers have talked about things like raising the price of the state-retailed gasoline, which is now less than 1 cent per gallon.
Jeez.
It remind anyone of The Incredible Bread Machine? You ever read that poem?
Oh, is it the one where they say, oh, well, don't charge more than the competition? That's price gouging. Charge less.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I can't remember which one's which, predatory pricing, price gouging. Oh, and if you charge the same, well, that's collusion.
That's the one. And then at the end, loaves cost $1 each to make. But our leaders do their best. The selling price is half a cent. Taxes pay the rest.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Check it out.
Oh, yeah. God, almost as beautiful as that one Kindle Stickmaker's petition.
Oh,
by
yeah.
Frederick Bastiat. That was solid gold.
Yeah, that's a great one. And something else they're considering is fixing their currency exchange system, where the US dollar is worth 150 times more on the black market than it is at the official rate. And I guess the idea of just letting the market decide the exchange rate hasn't really occurred to them.
Yeah, several hundred, nay, thousands of years of government intervention failing, but heaven forbid they actually tried the one thing that's been proven to work time and time again.
And you even have one of Maduro's ministers claiming that there is no inflation. That 700% inflation is just everyone's imagination.
God.
But the disturbing thing about this is, does any of this sound familiar? How much debt is the U.S. in?
Oh, jeez.
How much do we owe China?
Last I checked, it was 18 trillion. Well, total debt, not just debt to China.
That's the total, yeah. But according to the Department of Agriculture, and I have a link to this in the show notes where you can actually play around with the values and the ranges and seeing all this, but between 2003 and 2013, the amount Americans spend on food increased 50%, and those of us who actually do grocery shopping are not surprised. We've seen how much it's gone up. But inflation was only supposed to be around 2% for that entire time. If it had been, food prices would only have risen 22%. And if anything, food prices tend to rise less than the rate of inflation because they're always looking for ways to make them more efficient.
Indeed.
So the real inflation is over twice as much as what the government figures show.
You've said in the comments of your YouTube videos how much the figures they use for inflation, like the CPI, is complete bogosity.
Well, because they don't include things like food and other things that people actually buy.
I think you said food, utilities, gas.
Textiles.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that they say, well, those prices are too volatile. Okay, let's think about this. You want to measure how prices are changing, but you're going to take out the prices that change the most.
The hell?
Yeah, that's basically what they're doing.
In other words, basically it sounds like we're dealing with something similar to what Venezuela is dealing, only much bigger, much in slower motion.
Yeah, it's just a difference in magnitude, but the same hubris and denial are in play. So we could very well be seeing our own future here.
It's times like this I'm glad I bought. I'm not sure if this qualifies as a shameless plug or not, but I bought some books, like 2 by Randall Munroe, The Thing Explainer, another his What If book. I just couldn't resist after seeing the link you had on Facebook with that. 2 others I bought were Economics of a Pure Gold Standard by Mark Skousen.
Great one.
And another one that I've heard good things about from you called Failsafe Investing by Harry Brown.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
All good ones.
Something tells me I'm going to need them. Whew. Yeah, yet another nail in the coffin, and a coffin that's now more steel than wood in the fires of socialism. I mean, how many more billions of people have to die and lives ruined and destroyed economies do we need for people to get it in their thick skulls? This doesn't work. Hell, Mises, last I checked, mathematically proved it can never work roughly 90 years ago. And yet, lo and behold, the response to them from status and socialist elect seems to be sticking their hands, and they're just going, la 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 la, I can't hear you. Or the few who have enough integrity to just say, okay, fine, we admit it. We don't have a response to that.
So that's enough to make Venezuela this week's biggest Bogon emitter. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. And now it's time to frustrate this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And ordinarily on this podcast, we're using current statements and actions to call out the idiots, but just on occasion, we've taken a look back in time, years before this podcast started, to show you how little has changed. For example, we did this with Paul Krugman with a lot of statements he made back in '98 to show how wrong he was. This time, it's Greenpeace. What we're experiencing now with Greenpeace engaging in basically terrorism against farmers planting GM crops is nothing new. It's not due to bad people in charge or whatever. It's what they've always done, as we can see from this article from The Guardian way back in 1999, colorfully written by John Vidal, and it really reads like a lot of the stories we've covered recently. And this was when Britain was doing trials of GM crops to see how well they worked and what effect they had on the soil and the environment and things like that.
Even though damn near everything we have is by definition a GM crop, but, details.
So one of these fields was visited by 28 Greenpeace activists and their executive director, Lord Melchett. They used their farm machinery to block the entrance, and they came in all these decontamination suits and started pulling down the maize. And then they came in with what Vidal calls the Melchett machine, with 4-foot blades spinning around, going off at 25 miles per hour, and just leaving a path of just destroyed maize everywhere.
And by maize, I assume you mean a fancy word for corn.
Corn, yeah. Well, it's a British article, and for the British, corn also includes things like wheat.
Oh,
so they say
okay.
maize to... Yeah.
Well, remember, we're both Americans here, so...
Yeah, I try to consider the international listeners, because we've got a bunch of them.
Yeah, but given how long they've been doing this stuff, seriously, how's this whole organization not been declared a terrorist organization?
Political reasons, really.
Figures. if the so-called bad guys in this, like Monsanto, however sleazy they may be, are the ones developing life-saving crops for the third world, while you're the one destroying and starving people by, like I said, taking axes, blades, and even flamethrowers to them, yes, that actually happened if I recall correctly, then how does that make you the good guy, I wonder? I get the impression that these folks, anti-GMO and anti-vaxxer folks, basically want people in the third world to either live miserable lives or just stop living entirely. Though, to be fair, I see a lot of them being the environmentalist / misanthropic, anti-human population folks. Oh, well, maybe if 1 billion people died or so, it would be good for the planet, etc. That kind of despicable stuff. Norman Borlaug must be spinning in his grave.
So then the landowner, William Brigham, shows up, and his family's been farming the land for 300 years. And he comes in going, "Oi, oi, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? You're a criminal. What are you doing?" I'm sorry, that's probably the worst Norfolk accent ever, but anyway. Oh, he goes up to Lord Melchett and goes, "Look, it's Lord bleeping Melchett. You're a right Democrat, you are." So Lord Melchett replies, of course he's Lord Melchett, so I got to do him in a posh accent. "Yes, we're just doing what the people want. Pip pip cheerio." Hey, what?
I never realized how many different accents and specific dialects and regions of just England alone there were before I started watching Doctor Who. Go figure.
Yeah, and he talked about how over 120 villagers turned up to debate the issue and most were against it, so I guess who cares if it's your property if everyone else says you can't do something?
Yeah, 'cause screw you, property rights. Mob rule for the win. Just ask the lynch mobs of 100 years ago.
And he also used the excuse about, oh, well, it's going to pollinate and pollute nearby crops and all that.
Yeah, citation needed, pal.
So William's brother Eddie then shows up, and he's got a tractor with a big bucket. He's going at 30 miles an hour across the fields, and Vidal says, quote, "Eddie's not a man for talk. He drives straight into the barred gate, knocks it off its hinges, rams the Greenpeace truck several feet forwards, and barges away into the field. He revs up, picks off Greenpeace protesters, and drives straight at anyone near him. The activists flee further into the crop. Eddie spins the tractor around just as the Greenpeace machine comes around the corner at 20 miles an hour like a yellow whirling dervish. He corners it, slams his tractor into its side, drops his tractor's heavy bucket hard down on its rotors. It lies buckled. Eddie backs off." And I mean, the whole article is just well written like that.
Yeah, I'd say that qualifies as self-defense, given what they're planning on doing. And even if it wasn't, I have absolutely no sympathy for what are essentially pro-starvation terrorists.
And then, of course, the police come in. "Right, stop it, all of you, please, all of you, stop now."
Consular.
He actually quotes him as saying, "Right, you've made your political points. I'd rather you stopped." That's like the old joke about British police going, "Stop, or I'll say stop again."
Oh, God. Did they actually ever do that? Was that an actual thing?
No, that was a joke. But it's based on the fact that they generally don't carry guns. But, I mean, all the Greenpeace volunteers are just ignoring him, going, deeper into the crop.
Oh, God. So, basically, the exact polar opposite of U.S. police officers. Yeah. But that's, another story for another time.
Which is shoot first, shoot again, shoot some more, and then maybe think about asking a question or not.
While saying that you, quote, feared for your life.
Yeah.
Ugh, jeez.
So, John Brigham, brother number 3, comes up, drives straight into the field, and just puts his tractor's bucket down on top of the Greenpeace truck to stop it moving. And then at this point, William Brigham goes to Vidal, like, "Who are you? Write this down, you bleep. Blair is ruining us. Blair and his lot are exporting the agriculture industry abroad."
That makes no sense whatsoever.
I think it's just the fact that all of these restrictions on genetic modifications are just meaning that they're not being done in England. They're going to have to be done somewhere else because they're not allowed to do it. So anyway, the police arrive in force, and at this point, the Greenpeace volunteers don't resist. They're led away, but Lord Melchett's still out there, and he's only going, quote, "This is decontamination of the countryside. It shouldn't be being grown. I don't think anyone should be arrested for doing this. We're doing something which the public wants and is for the benefit of the environment. Now, where are my crumpets?"
And I hate to go there, but slavery was something a majority of people wanted, close quote, for several thousand years. What's your point, jackass?
So, William Brigham's still apparently talking to Vidal, quote, Write this down. I bet you don't. I find it amazing that a man who calls himself a Democrat and is a former government minister sees fit to take the law into his own hands. I'm doing this for environmental reasons. The spray I use on my conventional crops is far less friendly than what I use on this crop. I wanted to trial these crops to see if there are any downsides. I see myself working for the community and agriculture in general. I voted Conservative. I feel gutted. This is the best crop we had. We even had a letter from Michael Emitter thanking us for growing it. You know what slurry is? Well, it comes from the back of a cow. 2,000 gallons we put on that, and just 2 points of Liberty, which is an herbicide made by Agrivo, and these GM crops were designed to be tolerant of that. If that's not bleeping organic, then what is?
So basically it sounds like you're going to have to bleep out my swearing too.
Well, he's just... see, I don't know what he said because Vidal bleeped it out.
Oh,
he bleeped
okay.
out everything except for William calling Lord Melchett Melshit. He let Melshit stand, but bleeped the rest, so...
yeah, I'm told that they have, like, really weird laws regarding speech in England, like...
Yeah,
Is it true that they still don't allow truth as a defense for defamation or something?
There was talk after that business with Simon Singh and the British Chiropractic Association of changing that. I don't know what the ultimate result of all that was.
Well, here's hoping they eventually get on the right side of that, because, yeah, I honestly don't see any reason why truth shouldn't be a defense to defamation of some sort, you know?
So, a spokeswoman for Greenpeace said, quote, "People are very upset that the brothers consulted no one. We plod along doing the democratic things like writing to MPs and councillors. It gets us nowhere. It's not surprising that people feel frustrated and take matters into their own hands." Yeah, you didn't do what we wanted the government to tell you to do, so now we're going to force you to do it, even though it's your property.
Yeah, because fuck you, property rights. We don't need your bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like, can people please stop making claims to, well, this is what the majority wanted, which, one, even if it were true, who cares? It's still a fallacy, and for good reason, as is guilty until proven innocent. The fallacy behind that would be, for those who haven't cottoned on yet, shifting the burden of proof or onus of proof.
So these domestic terrorists were arrested, tried, and justice was done, right? Think again. According to the courts the next year, they had a lawful excuse for their actions.
Oh, of course.
And this is the Criminal Damage Act in 1971, which says that property can be lawfully damaged if the action is to protect other property.
Oh, wonderful.
And the jury bought their contention that the maize was going to pollinate and genetically pollute other crops nearby, and therefore the action was perfectly legal.
What does that mean, genetically pollute? I mean, this is starting to sound like eugenics, bollocks. Seriously, what the hell?
Yeah.
And I find myself, between you and Hawkeye, I find myself using more British slang. You both are corruptive influences on me.
Sorry. No, I'm not. So, English Nature and the Royal Society Protection for Birds supported the evaluation and insisted that evidence would be coming along any time now that shows that GM crops are horrible and shouldn't be grown commercially in Britain. And of course, Greenpeace just didn't want to wait for the evidence. They just went ahead and did what they did.
Despite the fact that it's been proven time and time again that they're about as safe gets.
Now, this was actually a second trial. A first trial earlier that year cleared those 28 activists of the accusations of theft of the crops, but they weren't able to reach a verdict on criminal damage, so that had to be retried, and so they were found. Yeah, so they ended up being cleared of everything.
Yes, Greenpeace and PETA, and to a lesser extent, I suppose, Autism Speaks. Proof that just because you're a charitable organization doesn't mean that you're not assholes.
Well, the good news is the Brighams didn't let this get them down, neither did anyone else. They continued the GM trials.
Good on ya.
But it does show how Greenpeace has been emboldened to commit all these other acts of vandalism and terrorism we've been covering. You know, defending the world from the scourge of healthy, life-saving food for the world's poorest countries.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if they're generally concerned about, food prices and stuff being damaged or whatnot, you think they wouldn't be concerned about the corn subsidies that U.S. farmers get, that, from what I understand, I've been told by this guy who helped with our generator that the engine in it might well have been ruined likely because of the ethanol in it, which just wreaks havoc on small engines, like in boats and whatnot.
Even the environmentalist groups have turned against ethanol.
And then, of course, I've heard that monkeying around with the supply of the corn and whatnot and the prices with that has basically sparked riots worldwide.
Yeah, you're just making it harder for people in other countries to get.
Yeah.
It's one more case where we wish we could do something much more horrible to Greenpeace than simply naming them this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this It's Just Like Working in a Fish Market, except you don't have to clean and gut fish all day edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes on the YouTube video. You can also become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Travis Retriever for joining me.
Yeah, 'twas fun.
Until next time, here's a quote from Ramez Naam. Genetically modified organism foods are feared and hated by environmentalists and the public alike. Yet the scientific assessment of GMOs is remarkably different. Every major scientific evaluation of GMO technology has concluded that GMOs are safe for human consumption and are a benefit to the environment. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.
By the way, what is it with the Android OS names always having names of candies, like Kit Kat, Marshmallow, Lollipop?
They're all dessert names, but it's alphabetical.
Oh, wow. Really?
You know, they went like Froyo, gingerbread, I forget what H was, ice cream sandwich, jelly bean,
Making me hungry.
Kit Kat, Lollipop, and now Marshmallows.
Oh, God.
I wonder what happens when they're going to get to Q. What are the candies named Q?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.